Hello everyone, this is Sumerian, and in this video we are going to be doing part 1 of how to build my remote controller alternative codenamed the Box. Really have to come up with better names for that. Not really going to go into why we're building it or anything like that. This might take a bit of time, so I'm going to go straight into it. So the first thing we're actually going to put down is somewhere around the center of this small train piece I put here. I am going to drop just a simple checkpoint. Now, the original design I had was actually hoping I could actually use the checkpoint to just bring the player back to the checkpoint as they moved around, but it didn't work that well simply because of the fact that the player stops moving when they go back to the checkpoint. So it really limits your control of the analog stick because it stops every time it brings the player back. But we still want this checkpoint involved. And then we're going to put 4 trigger areas around it. And if you'll notice, I'm placing the trigger areas basically what I consider half a block to the left of the trigger area. And I'm going to do that on all 4 sides, so that the very front of it doesn't actually cross the trigger area, it's just at the edge of it, and the one side is half a block away from the edge of the trigger area. So it's going to look a lot like this for our 4 trigger areas. Now, there's a reason we're doing it like this. The main reason we're doing it like this is because we want this area to be small. We'll get into that a bit later as to why it's important that this area is small. But all I'm going to do is shrink down these 4 trigger areas so that they're only about half a block wide as well. And so there we go. We have a very small group of trigger areas surrounding this checkpoint. And as you'll notice, in the middles here, 2 trigger areas are always intersecting each other. And this is basically how we're going to take care of the diagonal movement of trigger area. Is if someone is in this area where both trigger areas converge on each other, that means they're going diagonally in that direction. So we're going to do the logic for just these trigger areas first, and then we'll get into how I control the action button. So we're going to use some weather vanes here, and we're going to need one for each direction. So we're going to need one that goes up, we're going to need one that goes left, one that goes right, and one that goes down. And we're also going to need a 5th one that we're going to hook up a bit later with a locator, and of course the locator has to be hooked up to it directly above it so that the weather vane is now pointing upwards. So what we're going to do here is we're going to be using the triggering actor information of your player in all these trigger areas. So let's just make sure we're pointed the right way first. I'm going to put a button down, and I'm just going to hook it up so that button is going to tell my player to appear on this trigger, or this checkpoint, sorry. And this checkpoint, its only real purpose in life is at the very beginning of the game to bring the player into the box. So that way is our player's up direction when he appears on the checkpoint. Therefore, this trigger area directly above him, if he enters it, and I'm just going to say any player for now, but if you want to get really specific, you could design it so that it says only if player 1 does it. He's going to turn on this weather vane. Oh, sorry. That was incorrect. I'm going to remove that. Because these weather vanes that we just installed, their only purpose is to push the player back towards the checkpoint whenever he tries to walk through these trigger areas. So I don't want the trigger area that's pointing the same direction my character is. I want the trigger area that's going to push against my player. So I want this weather vane. If my player travels forward, I want this weather vane to turn on and start pushing back. And if my player exits that trigger area, I want to turn it off. And we have to do the same thing for all 4 of these trigger areas. So if my player is moving to the left, which is trigger area on his left, I need to push back to the right. And if he exits it, I need to stop that. Now, we're going to set all of these weather vanes to affect object triggering active. So they're only going to affect whoever comes into it. The other advantage to that is once you set a weather vane to triggering active, as you can see, it just turns on. They are always in the on state. And I find you actually get a lot quicker response time when you send an on signal to a weather vane that's already on as opposed to one that is actually off. You'll actually get a quicker push. Now, the other issue here, and this is why we've made the trigger area so small, is depending on which figure you have on the base, some of the figures are affected more or less by the weather vane. The bigger characters can kind of walk right through a push that will throw around a little character. So we're making this area small so that even if a bigger character is pushing through it, we're going to put some walls up so that they'll still be stopped by the walls that are in their way. So the strength I find has been working for me fairly good so far, is setting these to a force of 15. So now I should push this button, appear in the middle, and if I try to move up, I can't actually go up. I'm in that trigger area, but it is pushing me back the whole time. Any direction I go, the trigger area is pushing back against me. And if I let go, I'll actually slide a bit towards the center of this checkpoint. So that is how we are going to be tracking what direction your analog stick is being pressed in just by these trigger areas. And we'll probably get to the actual how I use that information in part 2, because we want to just build the box itself for now. And there's some more steps we still have to get to. The next step is we want to put up one final trigger area. And we're going to put it, unfortunately I can't do half blocks up, so it's going to be one block up. And it's going to cover the entire span of all the other trigger areas. And I'm actually going to just shrink it down to the same size so it all fits together. And this trigger area is going to be our jump trigger area. So when a player jumps and they enter this trigger area up here, we are going to be able to track the fact that they've jumped. Now, the issue with that setup, I'll just put myself in the box again, is you'll see if I jump once, I'm not getting to that trigger area. I'd have to double jump to get to that trigger area. So that fifth weather vane we put down and pointed up is actually going to be set. A fourth of 10 is fine, but I'm going to set it to players. And what I'm going to do is when I push this button, I'm going to turn that weather vane on. And this button is representing whatever action you're taking that is bringing your player into the box so that you're now ready to start using the remote control system here. Now, just because we're building right now and I want to be able to test as we're building, I'm going to put down a second button over here, and its sole goal in life is going to be to turn that weather vane back off. And again, that's solely because we're in a test mode right now. So with that weather vane set to 10, I'm going to push this button now, and we'll turn around and we'll see, yeah, that weather vane is indeed on, it's spinning. So now if I jump, I am easily entering that trigger area with a single jump. And so that is now our first input into this remote control device. Now if you've seen the video, there's one more input I have, and it was when I squeezed the range attack of my whatever figures on the base. That was my second input. And that one's a little more complicated, but I thought it was worth building. And so I'm going to show you how I did that. So what I did is I put some blocks around all of this trigger area setup. And what these blocks are doing, one of their purposes is, as I said before, a strong figure will push right through this trigger area and it won't let him go very far. So when he lets go of his control, he doesn't have to go very far to get back to his checkpoint or to get out of the trigger area, so that whatever you're controlling will actually stop when you let go of the analog stick. So that is one of the reasons those blocks are there. But there is another reason that those blocks are there. Is because I'm actually going to use a victory tracker, to be able to monitor and use the range attack to allow me to use it as an input for this remote control device. And so the best way I found to do this is we're going to use, I'll go here first and start the setup. I'm going to set up an object generator right here, and this is exactly what I do in the box I've designed. Is I use an object generator and a locator. I attach the locator to the object generator, and I put it right on top of the checkpoint. I tried doing this with a pack and tool manager, but it won't actually let you default the exact tool I need onto the player, because the tool we're going to need is the Diffusinator. If you don't have it unlocked yet in your toy box, I would suggest you unlock it. It's actually pretty useful with some of the Logic toys. So when the player pushes this button, the Diffusinator is going to spawn exactly where our player is standing, which means he will automatically pick it up and have the Diffusinator in his hand. Now, if you don't know what the Diffusinator is, it's just basically a gun that when you shoot at a block, it will change the color of the block. Now, if you were on a team, blue, orange, green, or purple, it will change the block to the color of your team. And this is what we're going to take advantage of, because we're going to put down team activators for all 4 teams. And what I'm going to say here, I'm going to want a logic gate first off. And this logic gate, the only thing it's here for is as a simple reference point, really. Any output coming out of this logic gate will be telling our game that the player has hit the range attack button. So it'll let the game that we're designing know that they've hit one of the action buttons. So what we're going to say here is under Victory Tractor, there is a specific section just for Diffusionator. And we're going to say if the color changes for the blue team, that logic gate gets an input. If it changes for the orange team, that logic gate is going to get an input. Basically, every color team sends an input to that logic gate. Because as you see, there's not that many blocks around this box. So if I put my color or my player to the blue team, and then he fires off the Diffusionator a few times, these blocks are all going to be blue pretty fast, and then the game will stop being able to recognize the fact that the player's hitting that trigger because the blocks are already blue. They're not changing to blue, so no output will come. So what I also want to do is I want to say if the blue team manages to change a color, then I'm going to change player 1 to orange. So now the next time he shoots, he's going to be changing blocks to the orange color. And I'm going to say if the orange team manages to change color, I'm going to change player 1 to green. And now if the green manages to change a color, oops, I selected purple, which I could have used anyway, but I want to do this in proper order. The green team manages to change color. I'm going to change the player to purple. And of course, if the purple team changes color, I am going to change or set the player to the blue team. So just so that we can test that this is all working properly right now, I'm just going to put down a quick text displayer, and I'm going to say any output from this logic gate we'll say wave complete. So if I fire the Diffusionator, we should get a wave defeat message. And out of this top trigger area, if I get a player in there, I'm going to say congratulations. So if the player jumps in, which is one of the inputs of a remote controller, it's going to say congratulations. And if the player shoots, it's going to say, oh my god, my memory just lost. I have no idea what it's going to say, but it's going to say something different. So we're going to push this button and see what happens. Here we are in the middle. We now have a Diffusionator in our hand. We shoot the block. Aha. Why am I doing this? My bad. One last thing I had to do when your players first brought into the box, you should probably put them to the color of the team. So let's try this once more. Push the button. I should be on the blue team. Wave complete. Wave complete. Complete. And as you can see, the color is changing every time I shoot. So I'm going to jump. Oh, I probably shot a lot and the text trying to catch up. Congratulations. There we go. So we have the two inputs going. So that is part one. That is putting the box together. In part two, we'll go over the logic of actually making the whole thing work.